Hello, and thank you all for joining the North American Coalition for Insect Agriculture's 2021 Annual Public Meeting. I'm Wendy McGill, NACIA's Interim Executive Director. Our member annual meeting will follow this meeting starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and anyone who joins NACIA before that will get a link to join the member meeting too. As an industry trade association, NACIA is quite literally the sum of its parts. We are made up of over 200 members in 12 countries, 23 universities, and 51 companies. Today, I'm very excited to share presentations from NACIA board members and other collaborators in the insect agriculture industry. You will learn about what NACIA has accomplished in the past year and our plans for 2022 and beyond to continue to help the insect agriculture industry grow and thrive. You'll hear from our esteemed colleagues at industry associations based in Asia, Australia, and Europe, as well as a comprehensive high-level regulatory update for North America. We also have a very exciting preview of a research collaboration with Aspire Food Group and NACIA about consumer acceptance opportunities for insects as food. We are engaging with academia and other researchers. Virginia Emery, founder and CEO of Beta Hatch, and Liz Koutsos, president of EnviroFlight, both of which are NACIA founding members, will make a reverse pitch to researchers about knowledge the industry needs now. Before we begin our presentations, a couple of housekeeping notes. Please introduce yourself in the chat, and thanks to those of you who already have, as well as where you're based and your company or university affiliation. There will be a live Q&A at the end of the meeting, but you can ask questions in the Q&A box throughout, and when possible, presenters will answer. This meeting is being recorded. The recording and presentations will be made available after the meeting. We're going to go ahead and start with our first presentation. This is from our longstanding and outgoing NACIA board president, Cheryl Preyer, about NACIA's accomplishments and work in the past year.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Preyer, board president of NACIA. I'm so happy to have you here for our annual general meeting, and I'd like to take you through a quick year in review. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about Wendy McGill, our first interim executive director. Wendy is probably the reason that a lot of you are here today. Not only has she organized the annual general meeting, gotten the word out about it, and had other folks help get the word out about it, she started handling our communications in 2020. About the time that you started seeing more regular newsletter communications and more consistent communications from NACIA in general. She also developed and launched our Lunch and Learn series after this meeting last year. And you've had the benefit of Lunch and Learn sessions throughout the course of the last year. She's done a lot of member outreach. Again, I think a lot of you have probably talked to her. And she has also handled our online marketing. So she's really done a wonderful job of amplifying the voice of NACIA as we grow. Speaking of growth, with our membership in 2021, so far, we have over 100 new members. That takes us to over 200 members total in 51 companies spread over 12 countries. We also have 23 members in academia based in different universities. In terms of our online outreach, we've seen growth here as well. Over 40% increase in website traffic. And while we use Twitter and LinkedIn primarily as our social media outreach platforms, we do have some good numbers for LinkedIn. LinkedIn shows that we increased followers over 300%, and our interactions have grown 25%. This is another place where Wendy has done a really great job of reaching out through members, through board members, to amplify our communications in these spaces. Now let's talk a little bit about the Lunch and Learn series. Again, these came about as a result of last year's annual general meeting. We hope that you have enjoyed the sessions that we've brought to date. And we'd really like to thank our members and our board members who have brought really valuable presentations to the Lunch and Learn series. So in March, we tied in with South by Southwest, focusing on circular economy and insect agriculture. A big tip of the hat to RNA of the NACIA board and also Little Herds for connecting us for that South by Southwest event. In April, we talked about insects as food and feed regulatory requirements in Canada and the US. In May, farming insects. June's topic was insect farming automation. In September, recently, we just covered frass, and we've got another Lunch and Learn coming up in November on fundraising and insect agriculture. We've had around 350 people register for this series to date, and our video recordings have been downloaded over 750 times. In terms of NACIA's support of the industry, this is bread and butter for a trade association. And this is something that we look forward to doing, continuing to do more of. Some highlights from this year were sending a letter to the USDA, as well as to our representatives in the Senate and the House Ag committees. Several of you may remember some outreach that we did asking you to submit your own letters in support of our efforts, seeking a budget specifically for the USDA to research insects as food and feed. They did respond to us and listed a number of the programs that they have that are focused on insects as food and feed. We supported an application to AAFCO to create an ingredient definition for frass for insect frass, in the official publication of AAFCO. And we have taken the best practices standards project from working with a partner to bringing it in-house. So NACIA is taking charge of that project and forming a working group to bring that forward. We also have collaborated internationally with the sister organization shown here, IPIF in Europe, AFIA in Asia, Insect Protein Association of Australia, drafted a letter to the FAO seeking insects to be included in the Codex Alimentarius. That's something that we all have reached out to FAO representatives in this international group, and shared a global collaboration announcement right around the UN Systems Summit in September. The industry continues to grow. This chart here is from Rabobank that shows the track through 2020, and those numbers are definitely moving in the right direction. Some major things happening in the last year are North American industry investment has seen approximately $32 million invested in the industry, and InnovaFeed announced that they will be opening their US headquarters in partnership with ADM in Decatur, Illinois. EnviroFlight announced that it's opening an R&D center in North Carolina, and the National Science Foundation funded a research center, an industry university cooperative center called the Center for Environmental Sustainability Through Insect Farming. More to come on that. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of NACIA. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve as board president. I am happy to pass the baton on to Virginia Emery of Beta Hatch, and you are in great hands with Virginia and Wendy Liu. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And now moving on, we'll have our presentation from Virginia Emery, board president-elect, about plans for 2022.
Thank you, Wendy Liu. I'm very excited for the coming year. NACIA has seen some real transformative growth over the last year, and we're really excited for what 2022 will bring. I'm Virginia Emery. I'm founder and CEO of Beta Hatch, and very delighted to be leading this organization as we continue to develop the industry here in North America. Obviously, our priorities in 22 will be set by our membership, but I think the guiding force of what we'll be working on is defined by our mission and vision. I wanted to kind of remind everyone about what that is. We are supporting the North American insect agriculture industry to become a growing, sustainable, and profitable part of pet food, animal feed, food, and soil health markets. Certainly, there are other opportunities that are going to emerge as the industry matures and grows. But it's a really exciting time to see growth across each of these different markets, and supporting the industry growth in North America is going to be a very exciting priority for us in 2022. One of the, sort of a broad overview, there's sort of 4 main areas that we are planning to emphasize: creating a regulatory and establishing some standards, strategic plans for the organization across not just next year, but the next 5 years. These are important areas to be focusing as we work to open market opportunities in North America. We'll be looking to cultivate and strengthen strategic partnerships with various aligned organizations, as well as establish a stronger lobbying presence within some of the different countries where we operate as member companies. We'll be building a funding roadmap, strategy and work plan to ensure that NACIA has a sustainable funding plan to maintain operations and continue to grow. And aligned with that is establishing stronger governance and operations procedures so that we can continue to develop as an industry organization. So to dig in a little bit about some of the strategic priorities that we see across regulatory and standards development in North America, and certainly the membership will be driving these priorities. And so at our next meeting, we'll be discussing how best to serve the members of our organization. We do know there's a strong interest in establishing best practices for farming and processing, much as IPAA has established these best practices in the European context. We want to be establishing similar standards here in North America, where there are some differences that will define how those standards are translated. And we have also multiple species being developed by our member companies. And so we want to ensure that we're establishing guidelines that apply to all of the different companies that make up our membership. We'll be supporting an upcoming review of frass as a feed ingredient, an effort that was spearheaded by EnviroFlight, but needs to be supported by a broader industry group. And this is really one of the driving forces of NACIA coming together. Having a unified voice across multiple member companies is a much stronger regulatory position than any one company working to open these market opportunities. We see a lot of other priorities and opportunities within frass market development. We all know that frass happens, and we have a lot of volume of frass starting to come online as new facilities are coming online here in North America. So we want to ensure that we're supporting the development of the industry by supporting this other important co-product that all of us are making as we are producing. We will continue to offer some fantastic training and workshop opportunities, but we'll also be exploring some more rigorous training recommendations and workshops, potentially establishing a framework for us to be certifying operations within the industry and offering that as a component of our 5-year plan. So that's certainly something we'll explore in 22. But the major emphasis, I think, of a lot of our work will be establishing some FDA, USDA, Canadian and American regulatory approvals for the species that we are all producing. For mealworms specifically, we know there's strong interest in portfolio development for or review by the FDA in pet food and aquaculture. So those are 2 priorities we're excited to continue to support. We also know that with crickets, there's interest in both Canadian and American approvals. And so across the different member companies, we'll be working to coordinate to ensure that regulatory efforts are supported. We are, of course, interested in all geographies here in North America, but Canada and the US being the 2 primary countries where it will be focusing in 2022. And we're anticipating with the black soldier fly that there'll be broad species approval with the FDA, and we'll continue to support efforts towards opening opportunities for the black soldier fly and all of these species that our member companies produce. We have some really fantastic partnerships. You'll be hearing from some of our aligned organizations. We want to continue to cultivate those strategic partnerships and strengthen them. So there are the other insect-focused organizations. Cheryl mentioned some, and we'll be hearing from some later. So we're excited to continue to broaden the geographic reach of our organization and strengthen those partnerships. There are a variety of regulatory agencies at various levels within the state and federal levels within the countries that our members operate. So we'll be continuing to develop relationships with those agencies to ensure that we are developing standards together. We are also going to be exploring partnerships with feed-focused and food-focused organizations so that we don't necessarily have to do all that heavy lifting. Some of these organizations have a strong lobbying, strong regulatory presence, and we want to be able to maximize the use of funds that NACIA has to ensure that we're meeting these objectives, but also doing so economically. And they're certifying agencies, be it in organic markets or other standard setting organizations that we're, again, looking to co-develop some of these policies and recommendations with, so that we are helping to build the industry together with these various organizations. We are going to explore and establish some lobbying plans. Again, the goal in 22 is to lay the groundwork for the next few years of development. I do think this is going to be an important priority as we continue to see challenges for funding, for regulatory priorities, and we want to ensure that insect agriculture is not left behind. Part of being able to deliver and execute on all of these priorities is having the appropriate resources. So we'll be building a funding roadmap and ensuring that we have the capital to execute on these various priorities for the organization. Establishing membership pro formas and really exploring the right tiers of membership for sustained growth and membership of the organization is a good priority. We've this year established our founding membership tier, which is allowing us to execute on a lot of these priorities in 22. So we want to continue to look to where and how our membership is being structured. We'll be identifying a variety of grant funding opportunities. There are plenty of different organizations that are keen to see the industry develop and support its growth. And I would anticipate there'll be 3 to 5 opportunities that we'll be applying for across Canadian and US agencies. Again, the emphasis in 22 focusing on those 2 countries, and certainly thinking about how we may expand to serve members in other geographies, other countries going forward. We'll be aiming to secure funds through the 23 fiscal year, but certainly looking towards multi-year growth for the organization. And part of that is also exploring other revenue generation through member value creation. Some ideas have included establishing some certifying opportunities and workshops, some ways for the industry to develop some more structure and independent bodies to offer these types of important things to establish the right growth path for all of the operators and members. And along with establishing a good funding roadmap is improving the governance and operations of the organization. Our first priority is, of course, to hire a permanent executive director. So please keep your eyes peeled for that opportunity, and keep in mind some great candidates as we look to expand both in that role and other hiring that we may do. So we'll certainly be looking within the first few meetings to establish some hiring plans and resource utilization plans for 22 and looking forward. We want to be improving the controls and governance procedures of the organization as we establish the right approach to serve a diverse membership. We have multiple types of producers, multiple species being produced, multiple types of stakeholders, not just company members, but membership across academia and across nonprofit and other organizations. So we want to ensure that we have the right governance in place to be serving our broad membership. We'll be establishing some better accounting and financial functions certainly, of course, ensuring compliance across all of the agencies that we have to work with, and improving our various systems that support all of these efforts. So together, these objectives, the roadmap for 22 is going to help serve NACIA in strengthening its mission and execution on mission and vision. Again, I want to remind everyone of the direction that we're going. We're looking to build a strong industry organization supporting growth in North America. And each word in this mission statement, growth, sustainability, and profitability, are all priorities for us as we look across multiple different markets for development of the industry. And it's a really exciting time to be involved in the industry here in North America. So very much looking forward to 2022. And hopefully our next meeting, we can be perhaps in person. Looking forward to hopefully continuing to grow and expand in the next year. Wendy Liu, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Virginia. Moving on to our international collaborators and partners, we have presentations coming up from Josh Galt of the Executive Committee of the Asian Food and Feed Insect Association, Duncan Rowland, Chair of the Insect Protein Association of Australia, and Christophe, Derrien, the Secretary General of the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed. And thank you all so much for making the time to share your experience.
Hi there, I'm Josh Galt. I've been part of the AFIA Executive Committee for the past 3 years, and I'm here to share a little bit about what AFIA is doing in Asia and what is happening with the insect industry across the Asian continent. Asia is a flourishing ecosystem for all of the different insect applications. And our members do come from all over the world, but primarily they are from the Asian continent and especially from Southeast Asia. Now, they span the spectrum from commercial animal feed, to industrial technology, to food for human consumption, to restaurants, to research and development programs at universities, to biodegradable packaging products, to cosmetics, and more. This past year and a half of COVID has definitely impacted the sector in Asia, but we've continued to press forward despite often draconian and strict lockdowns and a heavily impacted supply chain. Our events have also moved online, as most places have. But with our members, we've continued to present the sustainable solutions that are insects at webinars, at large animal feed conferences, and at our own annual event, the AFIA Annual Conference, which took place this past June. We had around 30 speakers who took us on a deep dive into a variety of topics, much of it centered around black soldier fly. We covered topics such as the use of frass for fertilizer for its phytopathogenic properties, for supporting soil regeneration and carbon sequestration in the soil, to data-driven analysis of more sustainable insect farming and supply chain, and of course, the latest in regulatory updates from around the world. And I should take this moment also to say thank you to our NACIA colleagues who provided great contributions to our event this year as well. One shift that is very notable and has been interesting to watch over the past couple of years, but especially the past year, is seeing the change in Asia from crickets as a focus to a much more broad focus on black soldier fly. You're probably familiar with Thailand as a cricket producer and cricket consuming country, producing those insects for human consumption. Across Southeast Asia, that's been the case, especially in countries like Thailand and Laos, Cambodia. But we have seen, and this is across the spectrum from companies that are huge like CP and Betagro, to traditional startup-sized companies, and even smallholder farmers are switching now from producing crickets for human consumption to farming black soldier fly for its variety of use cases. This is a trend that we expect to continue as many of the university programs are starting to focus much more heavily on black soldier fly. And a lot of the startup capital that is coming into the region, primarily in Singapore, is focused on the byproducts that can be extracted and used from black soldier fly. Now, you may have seen the CNN story recently on Insecta, the company in Singapore, which is extracting chitosan from BSF. And they are working with a couple of other cosmetic companies in Singapore, Spa Esprit Group and VMask, and they are replacing the chitosan they were using from crab shells, and they're using the chitosan that's being extracted from BSF for their cosmetic products. So this is an exciting new development that is more sustainable and it's focused on black soldier fly. Another company called 0.68 is using the lipids from black soldier fly for their face oil, and they recently won Best Overall Skincare Product at LOHAS Hong Kong. LOHAS stands for Lifestyle, Health, and Sustainability, and it's a more mainstream category. So it's exciting to see a company like 0.68 win an award at a mainstream clean beauty event, not just for the sustainable components of the brand and the product, but also by demonstrating the functional efficacy of an insect-based product. One pressing topic that AFIA would like to collaborate more closely with NACIA and with the other international associations on is developing key metrics and data collection tools for assessing the growth of the industry, the farming, the supply chain, and the overall sustainability data. Now, this is something that, if you're familiar with the research that is out there and the expensive research reports which often get quoted in the media, it's a joke. You know, they're quoting these people that searched on Google and found companies that haven't been in business for 5 years, or supposedly they're making millions of dollars on products which never existed and really couldn't physically exist the way that they're saying the ingredients go together. Obviously, that's not dependable information. And so for companies, for investors, for regulatory bodies and governments, for the media as well, who put a lot of this information out there that is just completely false, it's very important that we have truly reliable industry data. And so that's something that we would like to work more closely with NACIA and the other international associations on developing. And there have been some advances actually in this area with companies developing software specifically for the insect industry, like Cogastro and Bugbox, and one of our members, Intomo Ventures, who have developed a suite of tools which allow companies to see from the farm to the supply chain to be able to follow and drill down and get the data on how they're doing with their sustainability journey. Now, there's much more to come on these topics and many others from our Asia side of this beautiful blue planet. But as always, we are open to sharing information and collaborating with you. You can just reach out. You can find our information at afia.org. I want to say thank you to NACIA and all of you for providing us this opportunity to share a little bit about what's happening. Keep up the great work. We're looking forward to seeing big things to come in this next year in Asia and in North America. Thank you.
Hi there, NACIA members and staff. This is Duncan Rowland, Chair of the Insect Protein Association of Australia. Many thanks for inviting me to give a quick overview of Australia's insect farming arrangements, and look forward to catching up at some stage when we can travel and meet together face to face. Australia has about 18 active businesses, and of which 10 are for feed, and 4 for food, and 5 for products, chitin and those sorts of things. We have a very large number of home growers, and about 27 at the moment, and growing rapidly. The industry is really starting to take off and move from that function of being a startup industry to one that is now rapidly growing and moving through the process. Our key challenges this year and last, as you could well imagine, is really about regulatory clarity and making sure that we have the right regulations and acts legislation in place to make sure that we can thrive as an industry sector. Also, as a startup industry, we're moving from that growth phase, that R&D and looking at making sure that we're doing the right things correctly, but also moving towards the commercialisation of it. And as a result of that, our other key challenge is to move from a capital growth for R&D to a commercial scale operations, and making sure that we have the funds available to do that. So with all those those 3 major challenges, we have an additional challenge, which is really about the scalability and moving into a commercial sense. And that's what everyone, or those 14 industry or businesses, are now grappling with at the moment. From an IPAA, the Insect Protein Association of Australia, our strategic position is really about supporting those members and the industry as a general. And we really are looking at those regulations, those three things that we need to focus on. And that is the regulation and legislation, the foundational research to make sure that we are doing that, and providing industry support along the way to our members. And that's the greatest thing. IPAA is a very small organisation, but run by some very keen and supportive people that are really wanting to see the industry grow and flourish. I'd like to thank you for that time to present to you today. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Our website is insectproteinassoc.com. All the best and have a great annual general meeting. Bye for now.
Good morning, my name is Christophe Derrien and I'm in charge of the Secretariat of the IPAFF organization. By way of introduction, I wish to thank very warmly Cheryl and Wendy for inviting us to speak at the NACIA annual event. I have to say it's a great honor for us to be with you today. So as you can see on these slides, I will start by saying a few words about our organization before sharing some insights into the EU regulatory landscape and tell you also a bit more about the latest policy developments which impacted our sector. About IP first, so IP stands for the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed. As European umbrella organization for the insect production sector, we actually play the interface with the European policy makers in order to foster a favorable regulatory and policy environment for our sector. Who are our members? Our members are companies active in the primary production and processing of insects in view of their use for food and for feed. So as you can see, amongst our members, we have those companies, but we also have actors who are active along the insect production chain, including notably equipment providers. And we also represent and have amongst our members academic actors. Our members are mostly present in Europe. We also have a couple of members who are active outside Europe. Now, speaking about the European regulatory landscape, I would like to start by showing you on these slides all the different policy or regulatory milestones we have been facing since our creation back in 2012. I would like to highlight notably two major events which contributed to shape the development of our sector. One is the publication by the European Food Safety Authority of a risk profile opinion assessing the risks associated with the use of insects for food and for feed. And the second milestone I would like to highlight is the publication last year by the European Commission of a strategic paper called Farm to Fork Strategy, which identified the insect production sector as a strategic industry. I will share some insights into the major regulatory milestones, which were actually the consequence of these two specific milestones I was mentioning before. But before getting there, allow me to say a few words about the EU regulatory status of insect farming activities in Europe. On one hand, you have to understand that as insect farming activity is considered as an agricultural activity under the Treaty of the European Union. Insect operators have quite a wide range of possibilities to valorize their products, notably as organic materials, if those products could be certified as organic. Something we're working on at the moment in IPAA for your information. That also means that insect producers could potentially benefit from funds allocated under rural development programs under the Common Agricultural Policy, or could also benefit from funds under the EU promotion policy for agri-food products. I have to say that those few elements I was mentioning are the positive side of the coin. If you look at things from the more negative angle, the fact that insects are being considered as farmed animals under the EU legislation, that has some repercussions on the feed or feed materials you can give to the farmed insects. In short, as you may know, in Europe today, you can only feed insects with vegetable origin substrates or with products which would contain animal origin materials, including notably eggs and dairy. But you cannot feed farmed insects with meat or fish, catering waste or manure. Those subjects or topics we are currently focusing on in IPAA, trying to expand those possibilities. Due to time constraints, I will not dig into the matter. An interesting element still is, if you look at the right part of the slide, when it comes to the feed applications that are open for farmed insects, you see that maybe contrary to what is sometimes being depicted, the possibilities are quite wide. First, notably, as you can see on the top, insect proteins can today be used as feed for agriculture, poultry, and pigs. As you may know, very recently, we were happy to see the European institutions officially authorizing the use of those proteins for pig and poultry, something we contributed to also as IPAA. Nevertheless, today, as you can see here with the red crosses, whole dried insects are still not authorized for use for farm animals, and that subject is also something we are focusing on in IPAA at the moment. Ranging from and moving from feed to food, on these slides, you can have an overview about different requirements that apply if you wish to sell insects at European level. In a few words, you have to file and prepare a safety application, which aims to demonstrate that your product doesn't have a negative impact on the safety and for consumers' consumption. These requirements derive from the so-called EU novel food legislation. And since the entry into force of this legislation in 2018, a number of applications, dossiers have been submitted by insect producing companies, a bit more than 20 in total. And after a bit more than 3 years, we were glad to see that the European Food Safety Authority has had the chance to evaluate the applications submitted by the company Agronutrice in France, and that assessment led to a scientific opinion which concluded that this particular product was safe. In the wake of this opinion, which intervened at the beginning of the year, the European institutions and the European Commission has finally authorized this product for human consumption in June this year. In the wake of these first authorizations, we are expecting a few other authorizations to follow, starting with the authorization of Locusta migratoria. Very recently, in the wake of another opinion by EFSA, made on the 2nd of July 2021, we were informed that the European Commission and the EU member states decided to authorize this product on the European Union market, and this authorization should become effective in the next few weeks. But as I said, this is only the beginning of the story we reckon, and we are expecting a few other authorizations for other insect food products to follow in the next few months. That's it for today. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm obviously at your disposal should you have any questions regarding the different topics I was presenting today. Thank you.
Thank you again to our presenters from AFIA, IPAA, and IPIF, especially considering that it may be either quite early or quite late for each of you. Coming up next, we have a really concise yet comprehensive overview of the regulatory environment for insects in Canada and the US, changes that have happened in the past year for that, and also an outlook for the coming year.
Great. So thank you, Wendy, for the invite to talk today. I'm going to give you a brief update on insects for use in animal food, the regulatory status. Where are we and what lies ahead for the next year? So first, we'll look at the US, EU, and Canada, all of which have their own regulatory processes and all of which have very different current states of play. Then we'll look more specifically at the US. What are the obstacles and what are the opportunities? And then we'll try and sum it up with some considerations for the year ahead, or I should say 2022, as this year is drawing to a close. So let's start with the one you're most familiar with, the United States. Tried to draw a table here which summarizes the different species and which insect-derived ingredients may be used in which. So at the present state, all of you will be aware that it's black soldier fly larvae that has gone through the process. Both the whole and the defatted meal and the oil are working their way through the AFCO ingredient definition process. So we've had the most success with the whole and the defatted meal. Currently, adult dogs should be seen as a tentative definition very soon. It's been through the process and positively voted on at AFCO committees. We also have poultry and swine, which is tentative, and then we also have salmonids. So with the oil, we also have adult dogs just finishing up the process, and that will appear soon in the official publication. Same with use in swine, and then also use in all fin fish. Then currently, insect frass may be used as a processed animal waste product as it is, but there is, as you know, because you've all been working with me to put together the dossier, an intent to try and define an individual definition for insect frass to separate it out from other animal waste products. And so that dossier is prepared and submitted to AFCO, and we're expecting some feedback shortly in order to try and get that moving through the process and to see a new definition that separates it out and allows insect frass to be on the label. So that's the US. What about Canada? So Canada is very similar in one sense, very much a species by species approach being taken. The difference is that only livestock feeds are regulated by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA. So in other words, pets are not regulated. Food must be safe, but it doesn't need to go through an approval process. So therefore, insects and insect oil in general can be marketed currently to cats and dogs in Canada. When it comes to livestock, in a sort of analogous way to the US, we have the individual black soldier fly larvae ingredients working their way through the process to become schedule entries. That's the positive list established by the CFIA. So there we see for poultry, we've got the whole and the oil permitted, and for swine, the whole black soldier fly larvae. And then in fish, we're seeing salmonids and tilapia for the whole and the oil for all fin fish. And the difference really between the US and Canada is that we are seeing some maximum limits in there. So 5% for oil, for example, for poultry. And that's really just the Canadians being more conservative, which they traditionally are, and very much using the data to determine what would be the maximum acceptable level for a species before we'd see some sort of non-nutritional effects. The difference between Canada and the US is that where we have an ingredient definition developed in the US, you may then market freely. However, in Canada, having a schedule entry for an insect merely means that you can then go through a registration process. So in fact, there is still a registration required for all individual black soldier fly ingredients that wish to be marketed. So it's only one step in the process to get this schedule entry. And then we look at the EU. The EU operates entirely differently to the US and Canada. So here in the EU, we differentiate between feed materials, which are nutrient sources, and feed additives, which need approval. Nutrient sources such as protein, fat, etc., are feed materials and not subject to pre-market approval. So that's meant that there hasn't been any requirement to undertake a pre-market approval for any insect product. That's why when we consider the regulatory status, we look at insects per se. However, due to BSE, and of course that's extended largely in the EU under the TSE regulations, so looking at all animal species and the issues with feeding animals to animals, we do see some restriction in what can be marketed when it's from animal origin in feed for food producing animals. So what we've seen is that you can market insects along with other food of animal origin widely in pet food. So that's why there's no limits there. But for other species, it's been slower to gain market access because of this regulation. But now it's recognised that insects really don't pose a concern to aquaculture, to swine or poultry. And therefore, you can market insect protein and insect oil to those three classes. You just can't market it to ruminants. So what are the general considerations that we can see from that? That overall, it is important that all of three jurisdictions are very specific, that it's only feed grade materials that may be fed to the insects. So we can't be using waste products. And the overall objective is that the insects are treated pretty much like any other food producing animals. There are obviously differences in the way that they are grown and harvested, but overall they're treated like other animals and therefore fed feed grade food. In the US and Canada, as I pointed out, we've got a species by species approach being taken, whereas in the EU, it's obviously much wider. So if we look at the US in a little bit more detail, when will we be able to have all animal species for black soldier fly larvae? That's really the key aim now. And we've got some clear guidance from the Centre for Veterinary Medicine, the CVM, that will be when we have cats, as well as the current dogs, poultry, swine, and aquaculture for the meal. And we could expect the same approach for oil. So really, it becomes imperative to get cats through the system to allow all animal species. However, we are still seeing quite a challenge to get that pet food market that's all important. And that's because the CVM is pretty immovable, that if you would like all life stages of cats and dogs, you need a gestation, lactation, and growth study in each species. And that, as you'll know, is a huge undertaking, not just in finding a facility that can undertake the study, but also the cost of such a study. And what we are also seeing is that as we go through the AFCO process, we get more and more questions about treats versus complete food for adult dogs and for the adult dogs and cats. So that's something that comes up. It hasn't prevented access to market, but it does show the very conservative approach that the AFCO state officials are still taking when they look at insects. So what about the opportunities, the most important part? So while in 2015, the AFCO ingredient definition process was the most appropriate route to gaining market access, and that was therefore the one taken for black soldier fly larvae, there is now changes that mean the GRAS process is more of an option. And the primary reasons for that is it can be a little bit faster It's more in the control of the applicant, or as we should call them, the notifier. But also it now is listed in the AFCA OP. So therefore, originally there was some reluctance for grass because it wasn't listed in the OP, but now it is. So it does have that statewide access. So because grass, you can certainly have an independent conclusions before you notify. So that's where you determine the safety. That, while not statewide, can give you some opportunity to talk to pet food manufacturers, can give you an opportunity to register in specific states. So I think now there are some opportunities around using the grass process that insects are yet to explore. So I think that'll be pretty exciting as the year comes ahead, if any companies are interested in that process. And then one that we shouldn't forget, but may or may not be useful, is the common food list. So this is a list of ingredients that are considered common prior to 1958. And AFCA is developing a list which companies can submit to, and if they approve or they agree with the submission, then that means it doesn't need an AFCA ingredient definition. Now, that's unlikely to give huge amounts of access to the insect market, but there may be specific situations such as crickets for dogs or crickets for cats or worms for cats and dogs that may be permitted through that. And I think it's something worth keeping an eye on, even if it's only some access to market. So if we just wrap up and look at the year ahead, because I know I only have 10 minutes to talk. United States, the key is to extend the use really to cats and then to all animal species, to hopefully get this definition for insect frass separated out and really give some recognition to the concept of frass. And then to start seeing mealworm and cricket applications coming through the process. And the important point here, I think, is to revisit whether the AFCA ingredient definition or the grass process becomes the most viable and fastest route to market. And last but not least, maybe not forget that common food process, even if it isn't a sort of solve-all solution. So in Canada, as I said, it's again species by species, but they are introducing a new feed authorization process this year, and that may well help to facilitate approval. So I think there may well be more traction in that market as 2022 starts. And then in the EU, obviously, we've now opened up to swine and poultry. So there's lots of opportunities now for all insect manufacturers in that market. And I think it's pretty clear, while it isn't automatic to the UK, that could also include the UK if companies wished and wanted to negotiate with the government there. So the year ahead, hopefully we'll see a much wider market and keep everything moving along to provide opportunities for the different manufacturers. So thank you for your time. And I believe we don't have time for questions today because this is recorded, but I am very open to any questions by email sent to Wendy, or if you know my personal email, which I think you all do, please do go ahead and email me. Thanks for your time.
Excellent, thank you. And as we mentioned, all presentations will be shared after the meeting. So this next presentation is a very exciting one from NACIA founding member Aspire Food Group about a groundbreaking consumer acceptance research project for insects as food. In partnership with NACIA, we'll release this research publicly soon.
Hello, and welcome to the 2021 NACIA annual meeting. I'm Beth Kimmerly, Director of Food Design from Aspire Food Group. Aspire is working to pioneer precision insect farming at scale, realizing the potential of the natural world through the power of technology and allowing innovative industries to create products and materials that prioritize the health and sustainability of our world. In 2020, Aspire commissioned the Hartman Group to conduct consumer research to help us understand consumers' mindsets when it comes to eating insects. Our aim was to determine the most direct path to mainstream consumption of crickets as a regular part of a health-conscious diet. This study focused on America's edible insect perceptions using focus groups and surveys. Just some of the topics include consumer demographics, what formats, flavors, and TAM, or total addressable market size for both food and beverage categories. This powerful data will give marketers, product developers, planners, and even buyers much of what they need for the first crucial phase of the food product development process. The data will allow users to develop a firm product strategy and build a solid business case to mainstream insect foods. What we have learned upended many preconceived notions around consuming insects, specifically crickets, and the resulting data allowed patterns to emerge so that we could identify unique opportunities and winning strategies in the CPG space. The data supplies facts like 1/5 of all adults have tried cricket and want to try more products, while almost 60% are parents. As a product developer in the food space who's been analyzing consumer and market data for a number of years, this suggests that insect products geared towards kids may be likely to sell. Which brings me to data analysis. Aspire's deep immersion in the insect CPG market space and with consumers and retailers who purchase insect products has granted us some incredible insider perspective. The research Hartman conducted along with Aspire's valuable CPG experience has allowed us not only to know and understand consumers today, but also anticipate where they may be headed tomorrow. This slide gives you a peek into our own analysis. The time for cricket foods is now, with almost half of Western consumers open to adoption. We have incredible data that tells us specifically what type of consumer is ready to buy foods that feature cricket. The topics covered in the study range from the consumer profiles of current and future acceptors of cricket products to specific nutritional benefits that are ideal to highlight right on the front of packages. Our goal was to learn how cricket products could be best positioned to capture the broadest acceptance of consumers in America. We're thrilled to announce that we plan to collaborate with NACIA and distribute this valuable research data to our industry and the food industry in useful and topical formats. We hope to assist other companies and startups in the insect space and enable a clear focus on developing winning food and beverage products that offer the greatest potential success, while we simultaneously move our world forward towards greater acceptance of edible insects. Aspire's mission is to harness the combined powers of technology and nature to pioneer the future of farming. And as we shift into our role as the largest North American supplier of cricket ingredients, we want food producers to win by creating great tasting, nutritious, and sustainable products that are well positioned for today's marketplace. Because our growing population and increasing demand for food and material requires sustainable, scalable solutions that keep our world healthy. The data is super relevant as the research happened in 2020 during COVID. And as we all know, throughout 2021, COVID has continued to impact our world, requiring all of us to innovate quickly and adapt to a new reality. The agricultural food industry was put under enormous pressure in 2020 and 2021, and insect businesses globally are navigating a new normal, but COVID is also leaving new trends in consumer preferences and priorities in its wake. Technology, sustainability, alternative proteins, and health have all gained increasing relevance as we progress into 2022, and these are all positive signs for edible insect foods. This research will establish a robust foundation from which to build CPG strategies and it'll allow us all to collectively track shifts in consumers' opinions and behaviors towards edible insects, and the whole industry will benefit and be able to build a better understanding of consumer trends that will allow us all to make data-driven decisions. While we partner with NACIA on the particulars of launching this timely research, we wanted to thank each of you for helping Aspire accelerate the world's transition to sustainable ingredients and materials. We look forward to sharing our first consumer research summaries in 2022.
Yep, well, stay tuned for more about the full information for the research. We're going to move on now to talk about research in general for the insect agricultural industry. So we're going to hear from founding members Virginia Emery, again, the founder and CEO of Beta Hatch, as well as Liz Koutsos, president of EnviroFlight, about what kind of research the industry urgently needs and how industry and researchers can collaborate to fill these knowledge gaps.
Thank you, Wendy Lou. We're calling this portion the reverse pitch from industry to academia. This is going to be a sort of a short version of a larger conversation that we're looking to engage in 2022, hopefully able to create a roundtable, dedicate some more time. I'm Virginia, founder and CEO of Beta Hatch. I'm joined by Liz, and we're looking forward to just sharing a little bit about our view as industry players and the role that academia can support the growth of the industry. Just to start off, I wanted to outline Beta Hatch's capabilities and some of the research that's done in-house. I think this is not necessarily publicly known information, so I think it's really valuable for academic partners to understand what each of our companies looks like. We have very strong technical background amongst the team, as well as a diverse technical background spanning engineering, biology, manufacturing. And so, we are experts who have been trained often as academics and then made a transition into industry. We have several active areas of research interest. We've been developing equipment to improve efficiency and yield of production. We are continuously focused on process improvement to improve biological performance. So a lot of innovations across both of those areas. We have a genomics and breeding program, and we are exploring the use of gene editing to improve the products that we offer and expand our product offerings. We are constantly developing new feedstocks and evaluating feedstocks, of course, with a focus on industry relevant co-products or byproducts. And we also have been doing a lot of product development. Examples include how we might separate or isolate proteins and lipids, and looking at the downstream side from our farming operation. We also have a strong push on regulatory and product performance basis, both for frass and for insects as feed. So these are all areas that we're doing internal R&D work. Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Koutsos, president of EnviroFlight, and we also have heavily invested in our R&D program. The picture is our schematic of our new R&D center that will be opening in 2022, which we're very excited for additional focus and resources going into that program. Our program functions very similarly to Beta Hatch's. We have a number of folks that have advanced degrees in engineering, entomology, genetics, nutrition. We focus in a few different areas. First is external R&D, and most of that focus has been on regulatory dossiers and demonstrating safety of BSFL-derived ingredients for the AFCO and FDA approval process of those ingredients. We internally focus in a number of areas, including genetics, the nutrition of both the larva and the nutritional applications of our BSFL-derived ingredients, frass and insect-derived ingredients, to a variety of species. We have a very extensive animal biology program focused on improving live performance and production parameters using genetics, nutrition, engineering, kind of all of our associated disciplines. And then finally, we focus extensively on processing, creating those kind of primary ingredients, and then further processing, fractionation, and value add in our product sources.
So, now that you've heard a little bit about what each of our organizations do, I think what we would love is just to sort of let academic researchers know a few things about the research that we're doing and how best to collaborate and improve the work that you're doing. The industry companies are experts in production. And so we would really love if academic researchers use our products in testing. I think this is often a challenge where academic researchers may not know that we are very happy to collaborate in providing products for testing. And it's really important and vital actually that this happens, especially when it comes to any product performance, because products will look different when produced at smaller scale. Minimum commercial scale is typically about a ton a day of output, which is a very large volume and impossible to produce under an academic setting. So please contact us if you're looking to test products. We are also just unlikely to license any production technology from an academic setting. The reason being that it takes a lot of funds, a lot of resources, and a different sort of frame of reference to develop production technology that will work. And we have personally, over multiple different scenarios, experienced issues where something works in the lab and then just doesn't scale or doesn't translate commercially. So I know a lot of incentives are being put in place by a variety of institutions to develop licensable technologies, but it is very unlikely that an industry company would be looking to license production specific technology, because the farming methods are that we have already established, and it takes multiple years and a lot of funding to ensure that that technology is scalable and works. There are some technologies we would license, and we'll touch on that a little later in our presentation. We get contacted all the time by different researchers, and it can be a little redundant and repetitive because it almost seems like perhaps the research community isn't staying up to date with the literature. There are hundreds, if not at this point, thousands of different studies published about the use of insects as food and feed, about insect byproducts and co-products. And there's a lot of work that's been done. A lot of this is also done in different geographies. So please be sure if you're reaching out to an industry research team to read the literature and know what's already been done, so you're not doing something repetitive. And I want to emphasize that because a lot of the funds that are supporting academic work are public funds, and these will be scrutinized. So if there is duplicative effort, if there is, or if there are projects that are perhaps sending the wrong types of messages, these are going to be scrutinized. And we've already seen efforts in Congress to defund insect research because, in sort of to the last point, some of the public relations that come out of academic efforts are not always well aligned to the realities of the industry or sort of the direction that things are going. So please, keep that in mind. Even if you're not working explicitly with an industry partner, it can be valuable to reach out to us if you have a study you want to be working on and you want to be thinking about how to release the results from that study in a way that aligns with the realities of the industry. I think it's very valuable to reach out for PR support as you publish your work and publicize your work. And NACIA is a great resource for that. There are a few areas that I think it's helpful to outline where we don't see a lot of value for work to happen. Certainly, it's not our role as industry to tell academic community what to work on or what to do, but we just think these are sort of non-starter areas that I guess don't add value. So new species development is probably the big one. We have 3 well-established species being produced commercially: the mealworm, the black soldier fly, and the cricket. And developing new species with an industry focus, I don't think at this stage we would see the emergence of those new species on a commercial or industry scale anytime soon because of the strength of the existing species being developed and marketed. Part of that is there's a huge tail of effort to get new species to market, a lot of that regulatory effort. And, that's a type of research that's not always standard. The academic community is not always aware of the type of the way that we have to do this work. So ideally, we'd love to see all feed trials align with what those standards and regulatory efforts are. Things like getting an FDA review of your protocol can be really important to making sure that that work is helpful for the industry to secure further regulatory approvals. There is a caveat here. I think an area that's wide open is where we see value added investigation. So there's been if you're just looking at basic range of inclusion rates across, a species, that's likely been done before with the ingredients that are currently in the market. But the area where we see a lot of interesting opportunity is when we start looking at health benefits, probiotic effects, immune stimulation, some value added areas where it's a bit of a blue sky and unknown. Processing technology or farming processes, again, these very rarely scale from lab environments into commercial environments. And it's hard without a strong commercial background in the production of these insects to know even what the right starting points are for that type of technology. So again, this would be an purely academic exercise working in some of those technologies. There's a lot of work that's been done on variety of feedstocks, great opportunities there, but there's a lot of things about feedstocks that just, even if biologically there might be some good performance, they aren't necessarily scalable or commercial. Some examples are things that may not have existing regulatory approval, feedstocks that are too seasonal, feedstocks that may have a high processing cost to make commercially feasible. And so, again, it's a purely academic exercise to work with some of those feedstocks. So it's always great to inform that feedstock work with something that is commercial. And finally, life cycle analysis without industry partners. So doing sustainability work within the context of purely lab scale production is going to be misleading and likely result in a skewed analysis. So these are areas that we'd love to just sort of, I guess, PSA for academia to look to potentially avoid projects of these types. Liz will now talk a little bit about what we would love to see from the academic community.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the input we've gotten from other NACIA members to generate this list. It's by no means exhaustive, but tried to identify some really top tier areas of focus. First category being insect health and rearing. Feedstock assessment, as we mentioned, really focusing on feedstocks that are commercially relevant, and then specifically within that realm, understanding feed safety and contaminant concerns, particularly for insect health and performance, things that we need to worry about mitigating and how to mitigate those. And then the ingredient evaluation, again, commercially relevant ingredients that have regulatory approval or for which there is a path to regulatory approval such that it's not a 10-year process to think about commercialization. Next is insect health. I think we're all very concerned about disease vectors, particularly as we commercialize and have large numbers of animals in small areas. So not only the vectors, but mitigation strategies to manage or management strategies for those disease vectors. Pest control, near and dear to my heart. We grow insects, and so we are constrained in many ways on how we can manage pests in our facilities, particularly those that would be sensitive to the same, or that our animals would be sensitive to the same biological or chemical controls. So I think this is a very pertinent area of investigation. The one processing or farming process area that I think requires a lot of effort is environmental management systems. And with the caveat that we want to maintain optimal environmental conditions, but we need to be balancing energy efficiency and capital expenditure. And so having folks that have that engineering expertise and can integrate the sustainability portion of our businesses and the overall CapEx is really valuable. Genetics with genome mapping and SNP panel development has tremendous broad application to the industry. And on the SNP panel side, probably does have some licensing opportunities, I believe, for industry. And then descriptive microbiome work for both the gut and the rearing environment, so we can better characterize what we're doing with our animals and what opportunities we have to manage those microbiomes. On the ingredient side, I think kill step validation is really, really critical. Those methods are well established, but require a lot of equipment and require the putting in of pathogens. These are things we won't do at a commercial facility. We won't bring pathogens into our facilities intentionally. So having partnership with academia to help validate those kill steps so we can produce a wholesome, safe product is really, really important. The fractionation and characterization of insect-derived ingredients, particularly as Virginia mentioned, for value add properties and functional properties. And I think that dovetails into the health benefits. And I want to make sure we're clear. We want to understand these value added properties for humans, animals, and plants. We can't neglect that FRAS component of the research to understand how that massive amount of byproduct that we all produce can be utilized to enhance the environment. We talked briefly about animal feeding trials. There certainly is still ability and need to look at these, but I think it's either as a value added application, or if you're working on animal feeding trials for safety dossiers, again, please make sure you run those dossiers through a regulatory consultant or through the FDA, so you know that they will have value and will be accepted once those data are complete. And then also work closely with industry, because we want to make sure we don't have overlapping data and submissions. That just slows the process and creates confusion within the regulatory agencies. And then FRAS, understanding FRAS applications in plant health and nutrition, the soil microbiome and ecology, and in pest control. And then finally, as a commercial producer, I think we need to be paying very close attention to occupational safety. And this is an area that we could certainly use academic partners to understand the unique risks for our workplace to maintain the health and safety of our workers.
Yeah, so both EnviroFlight and Beta Hatch, other member companies often collaborate with industry. So we would just wanted to outline a few best practices for how to collaborate with industry on these efforts. Probably the single greatest challenge is that a lot of our academic partners want to publish the work that they're doing, and we as industry partners often are doing work that is either time sensitive or that we want to ensure we have sort of control over, and in some cases is proprietary. And so I think it's very important from the very beginning to be transparent about publication requirements or expectations, and ensure that if, for example, there needs to be a period of holding back that publication to allow maybe a patent process or a notification process to proceed on the industry partner side, that's respected. And I should also just emphasize, typically we will publish work. Liz gave an example of a paper that was published with EnviroFlight. We also at Beta Hatch have co-published multiple times with academic collaborators. So there's opportunity here, but we just need to ensure there's transparency and collaboration and partnership in publication. Relatedly, obviously there are intellectual property considerations that need to be respected. This industry has a lot of trade secret development because it can be very difficult to enforce patents in manufacturing environments. So as an academic collaborator, you may be privy to some proprietary information, and always good practice just to ensure that the right contracts are being respected, the right I guess the spirit of those agreements is being protected well, because this is really the key to the establishment of a strong competitive industry. I mentioned coordinating public relations, but I just want to emphasize that again. I think it's very important that if you're working with an industry partner, you are working with their public relations and marketing teams to make sure that the way that work is being framed is in alignment with the intentions of the organization. And this can be subtle things. We've all seen different news agencies take a headline and run with it. And typically there's a lot of misinterpretations with scientific work in the media. So we want to ensure that those results are being discussed in the right way in the media. And as industry entities, we have a lot of experience with public relations. And so we would love to support academic PR teams and research teams as we co-publicize that work together. And then finally, there's a couple unique qualities of academia and industry that sort of lend themselves and sort of suggest areas where work is most valuable. So on the academic side, there's been a lot of investments in institutions, in very expensive equipment. So if you've got a piece of equipment that's $1 million to buy, that's probably a good signal that's a type of equipment that we would be very interested in having you do research with. Maybe it's a new type of kill step equipment. Maybe it's an analytical piece of equipment that we just aren't going to necessarily invest in as an industry R&D operation. But that's again a good signal of type of work that would be very valuable for industry to have an academic collaborator in. A lot of the work that we're interested in has long timelines. So for example, some of the soil microbiome work may actually span decades. We're talking about these long timelines for results that just don't align with some of the industry timelines. So again, that's a signal of an area of work where an academic partner could be extremely valuable. And finally, from a risk standpoint, we as industry cannot bring pests, we cannot bring pathogens into our operations. And so those are areas that are ripe for a lot of research and a lot of work. We would love to be able to artificially infest your colony and see what happens. We just can't do that kind of work ourselves because of the high risks to our operations. So, if you are looking to do work in the industry, here's the contact information for a couple of our NACIA's member companies who are very excited to see the industry develop both commercially and within the academic world. And so these are the points of contacts at each of these companies if you are interested in discussing research with an industry partner. So finally, I just want to also emphasize that we intend to do an expanded session on this topic in 2022. So please keep your eye out for a roundtable event where we'd love to have some more time to elaborate on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia and Liz. And thanks to all of the presenters for these amazing presentations. We're moving on now to our Q&A session. And I'd love it if all of the presenters were able to come on camera. We have 3 questions already, and thank you also to all of the attendees who've started to send in questions. Please go ahead and put more in the box. I was going to take the first one from Kevin, asking about a regulatory update from Mexico. I guess the short answer is that we didn't have that scheduled for this meeting. However, I did want to mention that NACIA will be having a working group for our member companies and other stakeholders who are based in Latin America, and we'll be reaching out with more information about that. The next question was directed to Liz and Virginia, looking at around genetic editing for each of your respective species.
So
go ahead, Liz.
I was going to say that I think, GMO organisms are regulated across the board and there are very strict regulations. And so that the standard regulations around GM editing and gene editing would apply to our insect species as well. From an EnviroFlight perspective, we're really not focused on gene editing at this moment. We're really focused more on understanding what the natural power of the animal is and leveraging that. I do think there's some gray areas with CRISPR, so maybe Virginia can comment on some of the gene editing specifics.
Yeah, I think that when we think about the regulatory, environment around this, that definitely depends on what types of products we're working on. And so often when we're thinking about any kind of genetic editing that may be, typically is not necessarily in a feed product context. So, I think that we would fall under the same purview as other types of crops. That being said, insects haven't necessarily been, it's always been a little hard to align insects within the regulatory framework because we are animals. However, different types of animals than vertebrates. So I think that we'll continue to see an evolution there. And that's an effort that we're hoping NACIA can support, is helping to align the needs of the industry with the regulatory framework that makes sense. So again, this is not necessarily, when we say we're doing work on genetic, any type of genetic work, it's not necessarily to put a GMO bug on the market, but rather to inform our traditional breeding program, to explore new product offerings, to invest in intellectual property development. And so I just want to make sure that's really clear as well, that I don't think there's any organization within the industry that's specifically focused at this time on a GMO product. But we are hoping to, again, ensure alignment with the industry in the regulatory context.
Moving on to the next question. Liz, I wondered if you could take this and also speak to the NACIA application with AFCO. The question is looking at whether BSFL frass could be used as a feed material.
Yeah, so the answer is right now, yes, there is an AFCO definition that frass falls under, that is 74.6 and 74.7 undried and processed animal waste derivatives. Those have their specific requirements for how you manage risk and what kinds of specs, qualitative things you must analyze on a regular basis in order to utilize that as a feedstock. What we have spearheaded with NACIA is to help define a category of insect feed, or I'm sorry, of animal feed as insect frass, specifically because of the nomenclature associated with processed animal waste. We know that the frass has tremendous value as an animal feed ingredient, but that nomenclature is not very appealing for most feed manufacturing associations. But the short answer is yes, if you meet the AFCO definition and follow any kinds of contaminants of concern, you have an approval that is already in place.
Christophe, did you also want to answer for that?
Thank you, Wendy Lou. Yeah, I'm not sure the question was directed to me or was asked in a European context, but yeah, maybe to share some insights about the EU legislation there. So unfortunately, in the EU, you cannot feed animals, including farmed animals, with insect frass, simply because the product is being categorized as a category 2 material according to the EU animal products legislation in the EU.
Thank you. We also have a question moving on to looking at exporting into the EU, and specifically for any products that were originally fed corn or soy products with any aspect of GMO. And I wondered, Christophe and any others, could you address that question?
Yeah, theoretically, that would be possible as long as concerned GM material would be authorized for use as feed in the European Union. So I think, yeah, maybe that question would deserve some further exploration to see whether whether the products could be exported into the EU.
Thank you. We've got a question for Beth, looking at the research that Aspire had done, specifically around human consumption for crickets, but then also the expansion of into looking at mealworms as a food ingredient, particularly in Europe. And wondering if the research or you in general are seeing any similar trend in North America.
So the research that Aspire conducted with Hartman was focused on cricket. We have talked to other researchers about bolting on research for different insects, but at this time, that's not something that we're publishing next year.
Virginia, did you want to address anything on the food side with mealworms?
Amy, our VP of Business Development, may have some insights there she can share.
Yeah. Right now, we are not specifically approaching mealworms for food at Beta Hatch, but it is something that we are always keeping an eye on. And I know that in the EU and in the EU, that legislation is a bit different than it is here today. But we're very focused on mealworms as a feed ingredient, and we'll always be keeping an eye on opportunities for food. That said, we believe the barrier to entry for market for mealworms is best approached as a feed ingredient.
Great, thank you. Virginia, you had indicated you wanted to address this question around the different species of insects and how these trends are evolving.
Yeah, what's really exciting about NACIA is we have currently a very well-balanced founding membership across mealworms, crickets, and black soldier fly. So as an industry organization, are working to advance all 3 of these species. Yeah, we do see a lot of momentum behind black soldier fly from the standpoint of volume of production and the number of companies that exist worldwide, but certainly mealworms from proportion of funding standpoint are on a fairly similar playing field, and increasingly there's market interest as we start to learn the differences between these different ingredients. Crickets as well have dominated the food space, but are also starting to be developed for some feed applications. And so I think that the reason we see there's sort of historical reasons we see these various trends. Black soldier fly is very appealing from a waste management perspective, and so a lot of companies developed around that type of business model or approach. I think there's each of these species have a history in exotic animal uses, so live pet food for reptiles and other animals. And so that's one of the, I guess, historical reasons that we've seen these species that have been developed. So that there's a history of domestication that underlies each of these different species. But I do think we'll continue to see development of all three of these. And again, it's sort of like asking, why pork and chicken and beef are different meats that are in on the food side. They have different qualities. These are different ingredients. So although we are unified as an industry to advance insects generally as a category, these are unique ingredients that have unique value propositions. So I think there's a lot of strength in this diversity that we have in the industry.
Excellent, thank you. All right, we're going to do one last question, and this will be open to all of the panelists. We have one question regarding basically what is the status around conducting LCAs within industry, given some of your comments on the reverse pitch to academia that it's best done with industry partners.
I can take that, at least start with it. I think what we've seen with LCAs in small scale pilot studies is that they disproportionately impact the cost of producing these insects relative to commercial scale. And so the recommendation is work with an industry producer to conduct an LCA. And we believe you really need to be at commercial scale, and you need to have commercial operations to be really effectively evaluate the sustainability of the operation. So from EnviroFlight's perspective, we will be doing LCAs in 2022 based on our recent expansion. So the intent is to wait until that facility is fully operational to conduct that, and that will be in collaboration with academia.
Yeah, I think some of the work that's already been done on the industry, particularly in Europe, has identified things like the feedstock being used in the operation being a major component of the environmental footprint, the amount of energy and the way that energy is sourced. So if your energy in your geography is powered by coal, you're going to look very different than if your energy is powered by hydroelectric. So there's, as well as just some efficiency elements to, perhaps your climate could be really impacted by geography. So those being the two biggest ones, typically when you look at the environmental impact of an operation. Obviously, the way that feedstock is sourced at a large commercial scale is going to be very different than at a smaller laboratory scale. Likewise, from an energy basis, there's a big role of geography. There's a big role of design of those facilities. For example, Beta Hatch uses waste heat at our current location. So that's a unique to our location type of component that could skew, will change an analysis considerably. So again, I think it's important, and we're seeing efforts, maybe Christophe can speak to the LCA efforts in Europe to try to establish some industry standards so we can start to speak apples to apples when we talk about sustainability.
Yeah, if I may, many thanks, Virginia, for for handing over the baton to me. Yeah, I think, well, as you rightly mentioned, a couple of actors have already done the work and have developed their own LCA, but we do feel the need to to support those actors in making sure that we are using the same metrics and that we possibly have or would be following a methodology, let's say, which would be recognized by all actors. So yeah, IPF will very soon engage into that work to try to support as much as we can actors in doing that work. Also, we feel a bit of pressure, to be frank, in a European context where we see policymakers asking not only the insect sector, but asking all food and feed sectors, let's say, to do that work. And what we might see in the future is that operators, food and feed operators, would be constrained when it comes to the communication or labels. Notably, if you would like to claim that your product is environmentally friendly for reason Y, X, or Z, you might have to prove that you have adhered to some common standards when it comes to demonstrating or showing the environmental performance of your product. So quite some work on our plate, I think, in the next few months and years, I'm afraid.
Wendy Lou, if I may, just to butt in here, I think the battle, 9/10 of the battle here is actually coming up with a worldwide assessment process. And if you have a look at what is occurring in the feed industry at the moment through the Global Feed Lifecycle Assessment Institute, they've already got an agreed system in place, methodology, I should say, that's in place and could be brought across into what we're trying to do in the insect world as well.
Excellent. Well, we've come to the end of our meeting, and I want to thank the panelists for all of this, for your time and the amazing information that you've shared. I also wanted to thank the attendees for coming and very quickly share two small things. One is that NACIA has recently completed our 2021 market research survey, and we'll be sharing that information. It's for the market in North America. And the Insects to Feed the World 2022 organizers also asked that we share with our attendees that they have their dates of June 14th to 16th, and you can get more information at ifw2020.org. So I will be sharing the recording and presentations, and thank you again so much to everyone for participating.